Hi, I'm Hannah Wallace and welcome to FinextraTV. Kindly joining us on the call now is Matthew Blake, Head of Financial Services and a member of the Executive Committee for the World Economic Forum. Hi, Matthew. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Hannah. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, we've already spoken to the Cambridge Centre for Alternative Finance and the World Bank about your collaborative study into the impact of COVID-19 on global fintech. We've done pretty well so far to set the scene, but three is a crowd after all, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your input around the study. But before we go into that in a bit more detail, I understand the World Economic Forum has been doing a lot of work on financial inclusion during this period. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
That's true. Actually, we've had a long-standing financial inclusion track dating back almost 8 years now that has set up over the years a number of collaborations with different governments from Indonesia to India to Africa and also Latin America. And we've been very excited to help various agencies, notably ministries of finance, tackle their inclusion challenges with always an emphasis toward increasing access and also, importantly, the usage of financial services in these jurisdictions. So it's been a very fruitful journey for us, and the work is ongoing. We have a great set of chairs that help us drive this work forward. Specifically today, it's PayPal and the IFC. So terrific collaboration there.
All right, well, following on from that quite nicely, how important is fintech for continuing and increasing financial inclusion in emerging markets with or without the pandemic impact?
Well, we think absolutely vital. You know, when you take a step back and you look at the importance of the financial sector in terms of driving economic growth, in terms of providing jobs and facilitating the allocation of capital in a seamless manner, there's a direct correlation between the maturity and the significance of the financial sector of a specific country and the level of GDP that that country produces, and certainly the effects that it has on reducing poverty and also income inequality. So it's very important, I think, at a meta level to have a strong financial services sector, regardless of where you are in the world. When it comes to the role of fintech as part of that ecosystem, there's really an important story to tell, especially as it relates to poorer economies. You and I, we take for granted the fact that we have a basic transaction account. And in fact, we probably have many financial products and services that support our daily lives. But in emerging economies, you only have 65%, I understand, of adults do not have that basic transaction account in place. And this is a structural issue that fintechs can help address. Another structural issue is the fact that small to medium-sized enterprises, so small businesses, which are so vital to the vibrancy of an economy, go substantially underfunded to the tune of $4 to $5 trillion. That's the financing gap there, which is huge. And fintechs there again can play a very vital role. I think we've been very encouraged back to sort of a history of evaluating the space for some time, both on the fintech side, but also in conjunction with our activities on inclusion. We've seen a number of countries institute national strategies over recent years that look specifically at providing financial inclusion as a core tenet of that national strategy. And that goes to addressing anything from competitive dynamics, or allowing for more competition, thereby lowering costs and increasing access, to adjusting the regulatory environment to allow for experimentation, to providing incubators and accelerators to allow for financial technology companies to flourish and thrive. We found that to be super encouraging. And, to the extent that there's a vibrant digital economy on the ground during a pandemic period, which is such an extraordinary period for humanity here, not seen in over 100 years, that digital delivery mechanism in terms of e-commerce, and in terms of payments, and certainly a de-emphasis of cash usage for health concerns, physical cash, extremely important. If I could just add one other piece, and just coming back to this notion of SMEs, we've seen, I'm based in the United States, we've seen how much emphasis the fiscal authorities have put on supporting small businesses. That's true in the context of the United States, but it's also true on a global level. When you look at the aggregate globally of businesses around the world, 90% of those businesses are small to medium-sized enterprises. 50% of global GDP is driven out of that segment of the economy. And employment is somewhere around 65% attributed to SMEs. So when you think about fiscal authorities stepping in and the mechanisms required to support small to medium-sized enterprises, how do you get money into those businesses to allow them to survive during an extremely challenging time? Fintechs play an incredibly important role in that context. And that's why we think, just to reemphasize the importance of this survey, it's a critical juncture to take the temperature of that community to see what's working and what's not. And we're excited to partner with the World Bank and CCAF on this, which will certainly be a terrific collaboration over the coming months.
Well, as I pointed out to Anna from World Bank, we're certainly entering a time where fintechs will really be seeking advice. So what do you think the fintech firms will take away from the CCAF survey report? Do you think it's going to educate them on how to remain resilient amid economic uncertainty as a result of the coronavirus?
I think the survey is going to do a number of things. First, it's important to state at the outset that it is not an end-all and be-all in itself. It is a first step in a multi-phase process that down the line, this survey will inform future research work in a more granular way. But I think first and foremost, the survey is critical because one, it sets a baseline, right? I think it's informative not only for fintechs, but also for investors, for banks, and I think very importantly for the policymaker community to have a understanding of where that segment is vis-a-vis the virus itself, how it's faring in a morphing and challenging credit environment. And so having an understanding of how financial technology companies are reacting to this unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in is vital on its own right. The second piece that the survey is going to also drill down on is just what is their response to COVID? Like how are they intersecting with the public sector? How are they helping their clients and customers weather this scenario? And so there'll be some richness that comes through the survey on those components. A third component, which I think is really important, is around the regulatory dynamic. So if you're a small business and you find yourself in a challenging macroeconomic environment, policymakers need to be extremely mindful of that. And they have to understand in a nuanced way what some of the core challenges are. And among those challenges that can be addressed by regulators and policymakers, they should put a strong foot forward and try to deal with those issues. So I think the compilation of elements that will come through the survey will be highly informative, not only for the fintech sector, but also for a number of different constituencies.
Well, finally then, I'd like to ask about what avenues there are for public-private cooperation in a COVID world and where fintech firms can receive support from.
I think, again, the fintech sector is an increasingly important component of the financial services ecosystem. And as we look at how governments need to intervene to help the economy, to help households, financial technology companies that have direct access both to small businesses, but also to households in terms of being a mechanism for delivery of money, fiscal aid, and also advice is critical. I think we've seen that in the context of the Paycheck Protection Program here in the United States, where a number of marquee fintechs that have substantial in size have participated in that program and been helping the government allocate funds according to the program's parameters. I think there are some interesting ideas around using kind of crowd funding models to funnel some money toward vaccines too. We've seen that crop up in a number of jurisdictions, and that's a great way of channeling money toward a very worthwhile and necessary cause, which is to get a vaccine to help us get out of the COVID-19 situation. Right, yeah. And as we think about back to poorer countries and those afflicted by humanitarian crises, the fintech sector has been and will continue to be an important enabler in terms of e-payments and e-transfers to people in need. And I think there's a growing obligation as people are under tremendous stress and the health consequences of this virus from a humanitarian perspective for public-private cooperation to step in and for fintechs to step up to help and deliver some of that money and aid to folks that really need it.
Well, as you say, that's why we we need people to fill in that survey. So I urge people to follow the link and fill that in. But Matthew, for now, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for finishing off that part of the puzzle for us. We've got all three of you now, and a really insightful interview. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Good to see you again.